Thank you for joining me here on this Thursday. I hope everybody's having a great week. We continue to track Tropical Storm Jerry, which is getting closer to the Leeward Islands, and tropical storm warnings have now been issued as the track has shifted a little bit farther to the west, closer to some of those islands. We also have low pressure expected to form off the East Coast and produce some very heavy amounts of rain and destructive winds and waves for some of us on the mid-Atlantic coast and even up into the Northeast as this turns into a in early next week. And we're watching an area of low pressure all the way out in the Northeast Atlantic, which, believe it or not, could scoop up the next name here in the next 12 to 24 hours. So I appreciate you joining me here. We're going to get right to it here in the tropics. And you can see that we do have Tropical Storm Jerry here across the central Atlantic and moving very close now to the far eastern Leeward Islands. Winds are 65 miles per hour. It is located right at 16.5 degrees north and 60 degrees west, moving a little slower today, west northwest at 18 miles per hour. And it is expected to make a turn more to the northwest tonight and eventually to the north tomorrow as it rounds the western portion of a subtropical ridge of high pressure. Now, this is a new area we're watching. It's not really tropical, but beginning to show some signs of maybe some subtropical development. Believe it or not, all the way up here at 45 North, up in no man's land, well to the northwest of the Azores. And this system, we'll talk about a little bit in the video, could scoop up a name, even though it's got little impact to land at all with it, just a fish storm out there. So we're going to talk about these systems and more in the video. Now, if you take a look at the probability of a tropical storm, you'll see that it is indeed 60 to 70% if you total up all the European ensemble members of a possible tropical storm. At least the winds would qualify as reaching that. This was not really in the forecast yesterday, but something that has evolved somewhat over the last 12 hours or so. It's very obvious, though, that Jerry is a tropical storm, and that is going to be making the turn here and pulling away just to the east and southeast of Bermuda early next week. There's a new wave leaving Africa that has a slight chance of developing into our next tropical storm over the central Atlantic early next week. The future of that one, though, is not looking like a very likely scenario, at least to impact land. If it does survive, it will get picked up and pulled out to sea. And then things should quiet down, although we will have to start to watch the Western Caribbean and any other waves that leave Africa for gradual development. Right now, nothing's screaming at us for a signal of development, but something that we will be. Atlantic Basin. You can see on our infrared satellite, Jerry is really the only major player here to the east of the Leeward Islands, the center right about here. We do have our low pressure forming here to the northwest of the Azores Islands chains, sort of hooked up to a front. So I don't know if you could qualify it as tropical at this point. And the waters are not really warm enough for it to be a fully tropical system, but there is some thunderstorm activity associated with it. I'll zoom in a minute and show that to you. And then otherwise, things are fairly quiet. We've got moisture in place across the southeast here, where we're going to see low pressure forming along the tail end of our frontal boundary, which stretches basically into here. We do have a disturbance which has moved inland over Mexico and will get moved into our next depression, which has just formed here in the eastern Pacific. We do have disturbed weather across Central America, but nothing showing any signs of organization. And we'll watch areas coming off of Africa. There's still, believe it or not, a somewhat of a chance with some tropical forcing to maybe see a lower end system form in this area by the time we get into next week. So not completely finished yet with the African wave train season. It's going a little bit late, and it did get a little bit of a late start, so that would make sense. All right, you can see here in the Gulf and Caribbean, we don't have anything too threatening at this point. Some heavier rains over the southwestern Caribbean, but no organization expected from that. You also see disturbed weather northeast of the Bahamas, north of Puerto Rico, and that's all associated with a surface trough. Nothing to really be too concerned with at this point. And then much cooler, drier air in place across the majority of the eastern United States until we get into South Carolina and Georgia, where our front is stuck. And the reason why is there's a trough upstream that will be moving into the area here and letting low pressure form along the base of this front just east of Florida. And it is going to stay unsettled across Florida over the next couple of days. You see the showers and storms firing up along the tail end of our front where it is warm and moist over mainly southeastern Florida, but even along our frontal boundary across the I-4 corridor here. So nothing that shows us any signs of development at this point, but we are watching this area for low pressure to form. Then we get out here to Jerry, and Jerry has slowed down a little bit. The wind shear has relaxed a little bit, but there are still some signs of disorganization today. And that is good news for those in the islands, but there's still time for this system to strengthen, and it could do that in the next day or so. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then looking at Africa here, nothing to be super concerned with, although we do have thunderstorms beginning to flare up a little bit more here over the coast of West Africa, right near Sierra Leone and Liberia. So we'll keep an eye on those for you, but nothing showing any major signs of development. Now, this is an interesting development, and I don't want to waste too much breath talking about it, but you can see northwest of the Azores, we do have a little bit of a subtropical low forming, even a little bit of an eye clearing out here. Now, the Hurricane Center says 10% chance they're gonna FAFO with this and give it a name. The next name on the list is Karen, by the way. Joking aside, this will be a Karen that doesn't bother anyone and minds her own business. No threat to land. It really isn't a fully tropical system. It is not going to be any impact. And sometimes we get these storms out here that the Hurricane Center decides to go ahead and name because they fit certain criteria, and we just don't really have to worry about them. They just take up a name. And when I put my forecast out earlier this year, I was certainly factoring in there would be some junk storms such as this one, but it's got a chance. You can see there are thunderstorms forming around it. We may go up to a medium chance with the next update at 8 o'clock. Again, we're not going to really talk much about it. I may not even have anything to talk about tomorrow in my video, but you can see the tracks here pull the system northeast and then northward. The water's colder. We just don't really have a whole lot to stress at this point about, and winds with it are about 40 to 50 miles per hour. So not really a big deal at this point. We'll talk about Jerry, though. That is a bigger deal for those of you in the Caribbean islands, in particular in the Leeward Islands. The storm has delayed its turn to the north and west, and as a result, we are in fact seeing rain and storms getting closer to the islands than we would like at this point. In fact, even though the track officially still avoids a direct hit on the Leeward Islands, and most of the storm activity is east of the center, it is a very disorganized system, and the center is, there's actually more than one little center out here. In fact, if we put a pause on this real quick, which I will do for you, you will see that an aircraft have been out here looking at it. There is a hint of a center over here to the east of the island of Barbuda, which is the island that I guess would be most targeted by a system pulling away because it sticks out the most to the east of the Leeward Islands. There's also somewhat of a mid-level center underneath this canopy of clouds where all the heavier rain and storms are. So this portion with the center is expected to miss land, and that's why the track is expected not to have a direct hit on the islands. However, all the business with the storm will be hitting the islands, and if you are in Antigua and Barbuda, if you are in Guadeloupe, if you are in St. Martin and St. Barthélemy, and even farther up into St. Martin and some of these other islands, maybe even the British Virgin Islands, you certainly could have tropical storm conditions. As a result, the Hurricane Center, in conjunction with these local governments, has upgraded some of these tropical storm watches to warnings, indicating that the likelihood of tropical storm conditions is now upon us in Guadeloupe, in Antigua and Barbuda as well. So sort of the central portion of the Leeward Islands. The northern Leeward Islands are still under a tropical storm watch for the moment. That could get upgraded. We do have a tropical storm watch, I believe, for Dominica. I don't think Martinique is under that. We are going to see heavy rain, though, and heavy rain could be a problem because we do have mountains in these islands, and that's something to watch. Farther to the west, I don't think this is going to be a huge concern for Puerto Rico or the U.S. Virgin Islands, but there will certainly be some rain. Aircraft have flown through. You can see there's a large area of tropical storm force winds, but well away from what would be the center at this point. It is tough to pick out a center, but aircraft flew in. You can see there's a bit of a hint of a center here and then a hint of a center here. And that's under the thunderstorm activity. All the strong winds are over here on the east and the southeastern side of the storm. And then you can see on satellite and on aircraft data an area of very light wind where there may be another center. So which center takes over? We don't really know. We just need to kind of prepare for the worst if we are in these islands at this point. So the official track does bring the storm very close to Barbuda by less than 50 miles. When we get into the late night hours of tonight as a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm. With the wind shear that the system is experiencing, it probably won't strengthen much, but there will be an opportunity for it to strengthen, probably up to hurricane strength. By the time that happens, it's more than likely pulling away from these islands. I'm going to show you in a moment. There are still a few hurricane models that are very much struggling with pulling this system north as fast and actually bringing it over the northern Leeward Islands and even approaching the British Virgin Islands. That's kind of a worst case scenario, but system is very disorganized. So I would just prepare for the worst, and hopefully it isn't going to be a huge deal. Something to watch in Bermuda as well. The official cone, which basically takes the most likely track, which would be a Category 1 hurricane early next week, and pulls it away. And then the cone is basically as wide as what the average error is at this time frame in what our forecasts are, based on looking at model history at this point. And that spread continues to grow over time. That doesn't mean it couldn't follow the western portion of this and affect Bermuda. It's just right now, the forecast point has it pulling away before directly impacting Bermuda. And if you're in Bermuda, this is nothing new. We get in the cone probably 8 times a season, at least this year it feels. So if we take a look at the tropical storm force wind, right now it has avoided land. If I refresh this, you're going to see, maybe not, but Guadeloupe is now under that tropical storm warning. That should be in blue. The western Leeward Islands, basically on the Caribbean side, are still under the watch. And we have tropical storm warnings here. We're not going to see hurricane watches or warnings, I don't think, because the storm has struggled to strengthen at this point. Now, model guidance, take this with a grain of salt, but does have some of our hurricane models continuing to bring this right over the islands over the next 24 hours. We have the HAFS, which struggles with what it's going to do next and even drifts at west north of Puerto Rico. I don't know if that's going to happen, but the HFAS, the HMON, and the HWRF all have this farther to the west than all of the global models. So there is a split in the idea of how this will work out. The hurricane models are looking at multiple centers that are fighting with each other. The global models don't have the resolution that's nearly as high, so they just think this is just going to go ahead and slide around the ridge of high pressure. But you know what? From what I've noticed with the storm behavior on these models, they have not done a great job. If you look at the consensus and the average of the models, it's done okay, but it has had to adjust to the west to correct for error. And today's Google DeepMind brings us very close to Barbuda. So basically, just be ready for the worst at this point. I hope that's not going to be the case. Intensity forecasts aren't as scary as they were a couple days ago. We really only have one model that even tries to go beyond Category 1. It's an outlier, so it's not something I would predict. Most of our models are even kind of less enthusiastic about this even becoming a hurricane for the moment. And for now, the official forecast brings it to Category 1, but that could still be a struggle at this point. If you take a look at the GFS model, you see there's 2 areas of low pressure here. There's this little swirl that is void of any kind of rain, and then there's another swirl right over here. So the problem we have is that the models are guessing at 2 separate centers and where they're going to end up going. And as we move this along in time, you can see there still is a bit of a struggle, but eventually one low takes over. And this is very close to Barbuda around 8 a.m., 9 a.m. local time tomorrow morning, and then pulls away after that. There'll be heavy rain impacting the Leeward Islands well past the fact that the storm is lifting away. If you remember how Aaron worked out for these areas, there was heavy rain a day or 2 after the storm moved out. But the GFS model does, in fact, show strengthening to occur over the weekend and a likely hurricane by the time we get into Saturday and Saturday evening. It just doesn't go past Category 1. When we go into early next week, you will see that the storm is making a hard right. This is Bermuda. It is pulling away very quickly and actually moving almost due east by the time we get to Monday night and Tuesday. So at this point, nothing in Bermuda that we really have to be super concerned with, but I would still keep an eye on it. Here's the HWRF tropical model, and this is bringing the center of the storm basically right over the eastern side here of Barbuda. Let me zoom in just so you can see that a little bit more clearly. However, the strongest winds are east and to the southeast of the center and never really go directly over the island. They just kind of flirt with the islands. I don't know if that's going to be the case here, but tomorrow morning could be pretty rough, depending on how this all plays out. This is just one model, but you can see it does bring the storm well to the north of the islands tomorrow night, but actually bring some strong winds behind the system on the southeastern side. So even though the storm is pulling away tomorrow afternoon, the strongest winds may actually hit you on the backside of it later tomorrow night and even into the early part of Saturday. And then we should see quick improvement by the time we get to Saturday afternoon, as the storm may actually have a chance of strengthening. And here's the HWRF, which is our strongest model right now, showing a Category 3. And unfortunately, a track that flirts with Bermuda, but doesn't go over the island. You can see it pulls away at the very last minute. So we'll watch it there. The halves model here has some different ideas. I will show you both extremes. So that was maybe a strongest case scenario. Here's the halves model. It almost kills the tropical storm and keeps it as an open wave, but it brings strong winds across the northern Leeward Islands. It even brings them into the Virgin Islands here on Friday night and Saturday morning. In particular, the BVIs, it's got winds to 50 to 60 miles per hour. It does try to recover a center. It's just highly sheared right into Saturday. And then eventually we have something that looks more like a storm and maybe even a hurricane by the time we get to Sunday night and Monday. Here's Bermuda, though. Look at how far south and west the halves model has this system. This would be very unfortunate for Bermuda. So bottom line is this is an outlier, but this is something that we still got to keep an eye on and stay on our toes in Bermuda until we know for sure that it will pull away. Coastal low. This is what we've been talking about all week. Many who've been watching in the U.S. and you'll see it's going to get its act together here Saturday morning to the east of Georgia, northeast of Florida, and pressures will continue to drop as it moves up to the North Carolina coast very quickly on Sunday morning. The problem we're going to see with this system is that it slows down because there's a huge area of high pressure that blocks it right over Atlantic Canada. So there's a big high here. There's a deepening low pressure near the Outer Banks. And the problem we're going to see is that because this high is so expansive, it is going to drive a lot of easterly flow into areas well to the north of this area of low pressure. This system is not going to be tropical. It's going to have a front attached to it that's going to look something like this. So the warm tropical air stays separated from the coast with the exception of maybe the Outer Banks. What happens, though, is you've got this very strong conveyor belt of easterly wind flow that hits the coast well to the north of this low. So I'm expecting the strongest winds to actually hit places like New Jersey, Long Island, and coastal New England rather than hitting North Carolina and Virginia. That doesn't mean we're not going to have bad weather in those areas. I just think because of the way this system is lined up here, Sunday could be very bad on the East Coast, Northeast, as we get into Sunday night, Monday. And then finally, the storm pulls away. So it is going to get kicked out by the time we get to Monday night and Tuesday. If we look at this phase diagram, I'll explain this to you here. You can see it's a cold core system, but it does start out in kind of a warm area and then goes over into what could be a subtropical feature and could technically get a name. Probably not Karen if we get Karen out there, but Lorenzo. But here's the challenge. We have a frontal boundary that's stacked up in here. And if we move this along, you'll see that frontal boundary. And the Hurricane Center does not classify storms and give them a name if they're hooked on to a front. We've fought on that a little bit here. I think when you have an impact storm, I feel like it doesn't hurt to give it a name, but if there's a front attached to it, they're not going to do it. So you can see there's a very tight gradient here on temperature. You can see there's cooler air on Sunday pulling down through the peninsula of Virginia down into the Outer Banks. You see the warmer air hitting Ocean City, Maryland. They're not going to name a system where it's 70 degrees at OCMD and 61 in Elizabeth City. Now, if they were both in the 70s, we'd have an argument for that. But right now, that's not going to be the case. Regardless, this is going to be a big rainmaker, as you can see, and that rain actually could get enhanced up the Susquehanna River Valley because we have this upper level feature dropping down. And so that will be a benefit for those of us in Pennsylvania and the Mid-Atlantic because we do need rain. But what I'm worried about is going to be very heavy rain and coastal flooding and destructive wind on the coast, especially New Jersey, as well as Long Island and coastal portions of New England. This rain could actually find a way all the way up into the North Country here Sunday night and Monday. Northern, central Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, you're not going to get as much as you need, but you'll get a little bit at least. But I think the heaviest rain will be confined to the coastal portions of the Carolinas, the Delmarva Peninsula, eastern Maryland, New Jersey, and perhaps someone in the interior of Pennsylvania, maybe towards the Poconos, could see a lot of rain out of it as well. The European model continues to show this low getting together. We've actually seen some interesting scenarios here where there's a little bit of a couple of lows that are kind of circling around each other, but you can see here, it never really gets super strong. It's not hurricane intensity, but it is slow moving and it's going to get stuck right on the coast or maybe just inland. So it's going to be around for a while, unfortunately, before getting kicked away Monday night and Tuesday. And then here's the icon model, which shows a storm which tries to move inland, but eventually gets kicked out. So Inland areas, places like Raleigh and Fayetteville and Richmond, Baltimore, we will get some rain out of this. I feel confident enough to say that. Will it be a lot? A lot of that's just going to have to depend on how far inland this low can get before it gets pushed offshore. Where I think we're going to see more rain is going to be New Jersey, Philadelphia area, Delaware, Eastern Maryland, maybe even Baltimore and Annapolis, and eventually southern portions of New England as well. And then this system does begin to pull away Monday and Monday night. So we should see better weather ahead. It'll actually be kind of chilly by the time we get to the middle of next week. GFS model. And locally, you can see as much as a foot of rain somewhere off the coast of North Carolina. A lot of rain as well, coming right up the Chesapeake into central and eastern PA. This is just one model, but just gives you an idea of what we're potentially looking at. If we zoom in a little closer, you can see places like Swansboro are targeted at maybe up to 8 inches of rain. We do see heavy amounts like 4 inches around northeastern Baltimore, 3 inches in Ocean City, 3 inches in Virginia Beach. These will change. This model is known to dance around and change, but just know there's going to be a large area that sees a lot of rain. Even portions of New England does have the potential to get a fair amount of rain out of this if the track, in fact, continues up to the north. Here's a European model, and again, it's hinting at some very heavy amounts of rain. I will have the 12Z up for you here now, and you can see it actually looks somewhat menacing here for coastal New Jersey. We couldn't really get a drop of rain this summer when we needed it, but now it's showing 5 to 6 inches of rain north of Atlantic City all the way up into central Jersey. So 2 to 3 inches, maybe even up to 4 inches on Long Island, and a few inches as well for coastal parts of New England, and even as much as 10 or 11 inches over portions of the Outer Banks. So the big cities are going to get some rain. The coast is going to get quite a bit of rain. And then the other concern is going to be the wind. And the GFS batters the coast with 50 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts, maybe even more just off the coast. And a lot of this is going to happen on Sunday and Sunday night. And a lot of it's not just going to have to do with the low pressure deepening, but because of the big high to the north, which strengthens that wind gradient between the two. Here's a closer look at the GFS showing when the strongest winds are going to hit. Saturday night in the Outer Banks, Sunday morning in southeastern Virginia, Sunday during the day across the Chesapeake region, picking up Sunday in New Jersey, and then Sunday afternoon on Long Island, Sunday night across coastal New England, and then hopefully we'll see the winds dying down substantially on Monday. Here's a look at the European. I don't think it's going to be a whole lot different based on what I'm seeing. It's got some pretty strong winds, and of concern is what it's showing on the coast of New Jersey at this point. Tough to see right here, but 50, 60, maybe even 70 mile per hour winds. Even Montauk, some strong winds with this particular run of the European. Zooming out a little bit, you can see the worst of those winds is likely to occur late Sunday night and early in the day on Monday. And this chart's going to be kind of difficult to read. I can't zoom it in. I don't have that capability. But if we look at the European ensembles, I would prepare for the worst. And we see on Hatteras, for example, several ensemble members that are showing wind gusts over 40 miles per hour, even overnight tonight, and then ramping up to 50 to perhaps 60 miles per hour over the weekend. We have some ensembles showing potentially hurricane force wind gusts. That would be the extreme, but high level potential for this to happen. And that would happen sometime in the morning on Sunday. That's for Hatteras, looking at 40 to 60 mile per hour gusts, locally as high as 65 if this pans out. A little bit later, that would happen sometime on Sunday morning to midday Sunday. Wildwood, New Jersey, even higher, potentially 65 to 70. We even have one ensemble member showing an 84 mile per hour gust. Again, that's an outlier, but something just to keep in mind. That would happen sometime in the morning on Sunday. Montauk, New York, these winds could be quite high, 60 to 70 miles per hour. Local gusts could be in the range of the low 80s if one of these ensembles ends up being right. So some substantial wind that we're talking about. Block Island, Rhode Island, 60 to 70 mile per hour gusts, likely, perhaps over 80 if you believe this one ensemble. And that would be Sunday in the afternoon. And then Provincetown, Massachusetts, a little less than Block Island, 50 to 60 with possibilities of closer to 70. So that's worst case scenario, but it never hurts to be prepared for something like that. All right, looking at the Eastern Pacific, we've got 3 systems on the map. Well, Octave is basically done. Priscilla is weakening. We have a new tropical storm, Raymond, and that is actually going to be probably the one to be most concerned with when it comes to flooding here. Here's a look at the Pacific real quick, and I will zoom in so you can see Priscilla, which is over colder water and gradually weakening. Here's Raymond, which is going to be approaching the coast of the Riviera of Mexico shortly. Do have tropical storm watches there. Here's a closer view of Priscilla off of the Baja California Peninsula, and expected to weaken substantially. That moisture, though, gets drawn up into the desert southwest, and there is a moderate risk of flooding across central and even northern portions of Arizona over the next couple of days, and actually right on into Saturday. Here's a look at what's going to be Raymond if it hasn't been upgraded yet. And it is not expected to directly hit the Mexican coast, but is bringing heavy rain to these areas west of Acapulco and around Puerto Vallarta. We're going to see that closest impact here tomorrow afternoon. It will weaken again because we have cooler water and we have some increased wind shear. But you can see the cone of uncertainty gets all the way up to the U.S.-Mexico border near Nogales, Arizona. And that'll be a lot weaker at that point. But we are going to see heavy rainfall and perhaps several inches of rain, especially across Mexico. So something to be prepared for here. And in the Western Pacific, two systems getting close to Japan. We already have a typhoon that has made a very close approach. That is Halong. That's moving out and weakening. The next one is Nakri, which is expected to strengthen and become our next typhoon just south of Tokyo by a few hundred miles. Interestingly, the Japanese Meteorological Agency has had some aircraft in here flying through these storms, at least through Halong. So they'll fly some shorter distance flights just to get an idea. Neither of these looks to be a direct hit, but it will bring rough surf to Japan. And more importantly, because we have two recurving storms, over time, this is going to lead to a more energized jet stream, which will be able to pull some colder air down. And that's going to lead to more volatility in our North American weather pattern later in the month of October. So we could see some more wild swings in the weather coming up, even though after this cool spell in the east, we're in for some milder temperatures for the month of October. So I appreciate you joining me here this afternoon. Thank you to all of the subscribers. And if you haven't yet subscribed, I encourage you to do so. It's free. Hit that button and you'll be able to continue to get updated with the latest information here and videos. And welcome to all the new members. I'm going to mention you all by name here in the next couple of days. I appreciate you all joining. For just a small cost, you can join and just help support me and help grow this community here as well. And speaking of community, I want to leave you all with a word of encouragement. As a Christian man, I give all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. But I am going to go back all the way to the Old Testament and the Israeli law. Leviticus 26:3-4 is the scripture of the day. If you follow my decrees and are careful to obey my commands, I will send you rain in its season, and the ground will yield its crops and the trees their fruit. And this is conditional love from God, saying that God will bless you, but you have to follow his laws. God has created all of us in his image, and he has sent his son Jesus to die on the cross for us. Now, that happened after this book was written, but the promise remains the same, that if you repent and turn to God, he will bless you with rain when you need it. We're going into a La Nina. That's going to impact some agriculture in South America and other growing regions. It's going to impact the weather here if you're in the U.S. or in North America. We go through cycles of extreme weather all the time, just like in life, how you go through cycles of extremes. But God is still good. And when you turn to him, wonderful things can happen. And the most wonderful of these at all is something that we don't even have to beg for or just continue to ask for. Is something that we don't have to earn. It is something that is given to us if we choose to accept Jesus as our Savior. And that is not something you can earn. It is, in fact, a gift from God, and that is eternal salvation. That is an opportunity that I hope that you have made a choice to follow, and I encourage you to do so. If you haven't, I'm happy to talk with you offline about it. But just know that whatever you believe, I pray for you. You are a member of this community if you've come here, and you mean something to me. So thank you so much for joining me here on this Thursday. I'll be back tomorrow and hope everybody has a great evening. See ya.